In this video, we're going to take a quick look at virtual switches. So virtual switches are much like layer 3 routing instances. In fact, you configure them in exactly the same way. You're configuring them under the routing instance stanza in Junos configuration. It's just you're specifying that they are the type virtual switch rather than, say, a virtual router or a VRF. And much like layer 3 routing instances, we're just providing logical separation between different logical domains. It's just that we're dealing with layer 2 here rather than layer 3. With virtual switches, what you're getting is you're getting separate layer 2 namespace. So you have the set of VLANs that you want to use allocated per virtual switch, and you can use the same VLANs again and again per virtual switch, much like you can use the same IP addressing in separate virtual routers. And much like virtual routers as well, you have separate forwarding tables. With virtual routers, you've got separate routing tables per virtual router. With virtual switches, you have separate MAC tables per virtual switch. And to illustrate these concepts further, I've drawn up the internals of an example Juniper router on the right-hand side of the board. And we've got our various different tables that are interconnected. And let's walk through how they all interplay together. So we have our parent IPv4 routing table, inet.0, at the top here. We've got the default switch MAC tables down at the bottom. So this is when you have just bridge domains configured outside of routing instances. So just at the parent configuration level, you are configuring bridge domains on your MX device. And we also have an example of a virtual switch configured here, VS1. And this is a virtual switch that's been configured under routing instances. So you can see that the MAC tables are separate for our default switch instance and our virtual switch instance. And if you were to configure additional virtual switch instances, they would then also have separate MAC tables. And you can be associating VLAN 20 here, VLAN 20 here, VLAN 20 on another virtual switch, and that VLAN 20 in each of these tables is completely separate. There's no flooding link between those VLAN 20s. They're all completely segregated between the virtual switches themselves and the virtual switches and the default switch instance. If you wanted to interconnect either VLANs in the default switch or VLANs in virtual switches with the inet.0 routing table, i.e. you want to provide a layer 3 gateway for hosts that are connected to your layer 2 domains, then to do this you use IRB interfaces. You configure a routing interface under your bridge domain, either in your default switch or in your virtual switch, and this routing interface is going to be an IRB interface. And the IRB interface, whether it's for your main default switch instance or any virtual switch instance, by default gets placed in the main master routing table, the inet.0 routing table. So we have our separate MAC tables here with our switching instances. And you would of course associate interfaces with these tables. If you're doing this for a virtual switch, you would configure it under the routing instance exactly like you would a layer 3 routing instance. You specify interface and the interface name under the routing instance name, and that associates those interfaces with those tables. If you wanted to interconnect virtual switch instances, you can do that with an external loop. So you'd have a physical piece of copper or fiber connecting 2 ports on your device. One port would live in one virtual switch, another port would live in another virtual switch. And that way you can interconnect your different separate virtual switch instances. And this is a quick overview of virtual switches.